Welcome to the BizNation podcast. I'm your host, Kerry Zarb. We have a new episode for you each week that includes interviews with leading experts as well as insights from myself, all designed to help you in your business. If you're looking for support in your business, join us on Facebook at Micro and Small Business Support Group. Proudly brought to you by Zinc Business Solutions. On today's podcast, we're joined by Rowena, the founder of The Salt Box, an online retail and wholesale store specialising in 100% natural gourmet foods and bath salts. Prior to The Salt Box, Rowena felt in her elements in the corporate world with management positions in corporate strategy, product and channel management in Australia, the USA and Canada. Rowena left the corporate world on the back of a life-changing event, and her passion now rests with small business and all the ups and downs on the roller coaster ride. Welcome to the show, Rowena.
Thanks, Kerry. Thanks for having me.
Very welcome. Good to have you here, and we've got a few things we want to go through together, which is awesome. My first question is, for the listeners, what is the Salt Box?
The Salt Box is an online retailer and wholesaler of 100% natural salts. And, while that might sound somewhat obvious, many salts around the nation are not clean and trusted and come from natural sources, and particularly in the bath salt arena. So a lot of them are manufactured in Asia, for example, and there's some question about the quality of the salts. So we specialise in 100% natural salts. We're one of the only suppliers of natural Epsom salts, the cleanest magnesiums, and also a wide range of gourmet salts. We actually distribute a range from the US, and they're really phenomenal, like smoked salts and truffle salts and things like that. So a specialty niche, if you like.
Yeah.
And we find that we're not always going to be stocked in retailers because it's not necessarily high volume in one given retailer, but people want to buy it online.
Yeah. And you wholesale as well, so you do have your products going to retail stores.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, we have some of our bath salt products in the Go Vita stores, and then we also sell to some people that repackage it themselves as well.
Oh, wow.
Convert something to themselves. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what inspired you to start this business?
Yeah, it does feel a bit random, doesn't it? It's interesting how things evolve. So I was working in the US in product development, product marketing, and I sort of had enough of the corporate world, and I started working for a friend who ran a very sort of prestigious little pastry school, and they would only use the French salt. And so when I moved back to Australia, because I'm from Australia, I wanted to find that salt and found it was like $30 for 100 grams at Simon Johnson here in Sydney. And I realised that someone was making some money, and I just sort of started understanding that category better. And I'd always, had a desire to run my own company. And I thought it was a good fit because it's sort of shelf stable. It's something I could do online while I was working, because I ran the company for quite some time while I was working.
Yeah.
And it just sort of made sense.
Yeah.
And it was different, and people weren't doing it in Australia.
Yeah, exactly. I can't say I've come across myself a company that is doing exclusive, like particularly the 100% natural salts. It's just not a common thing, is it?
No.
Yeah, awesome. And you left the corporate career to start the Salt Box. How did you transition, and what did you learn during that transition?
It was a long transition, actually. So I started the Salt Box, and I was running it at sort of night and the weekend out of a Kennett self-storage unit. And I started, I asked, I had a long relationship with my employer. I was doing corporate strategy, and I'd asked them to reduce my hours, and I started going 4 days a week. And then I got breast cancer. So that took me out of the game for about a year.
Wow.
Of both my own business as well as the Salt Box, as well as my employer.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a few years to really kind of get my energy and drive back into the Salt Box. And I went back to work after having treatment. and then decided it was full-time salt box. And from there, it really grew much faster. So probably, I guess my lesson for some people is don't wait too long. It does require full attention. And really, it's quite stressful to manage both as well. I was taking sort of salt box calls, in the office of my employer, and those things are not always very comfortable. So I think the other thing is that, you realize that you really have to do everything. And in the early stages of a small business, and you are doing everything. I was packing orders, I was, packing salt, I was doing all sorts of things. It's a kind of an adventure, but over time, as your time gets tighter and tighter, and you're more time poor, it is really quite stressful to be doing everything. And I don't think I truly understood that as much until I did it.
Yep.
So I'd sort of encourage people to really think that through. It's, it's probably 3 or 4 times harder than it might appear.
Yeah. So what you're saying for the listeners is the side hustle is good, and it's good to start there, but really think about how long you're going to be in that area of part-time before going to the full-time commitment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for me, that was actually probably, I hadn't put enough focus on scale early enough. And scale's required, obviously, to go full-time. So that real push for scale, I would have done probably differently.
Yeah.
In hindsight, But I mean, everyone has a journey that's unique, and that's part of it.
It absolutely is. You're right. And I think we go through these periods in our business, and isn't it amazing to look back and learn from that situation, not just, sit there and go, oh, that was then, this is now, but actually grab hold of those memories and learn something from them. I think is fantastic as a small business owner. And if you're anything like me, which I think you are based on our previous chat, it's never regret. It's never a case of, you kick yourself to a little degree, but at the same time, it's brought you to where you are now, and it's all serves a purpose. And I think it's great.
Yeah, I think sometimes the media portrays the word startup as some sort of glamorous thing a 26-year-old does, and they get millions of dollars in VC funding, and it's a glamorous activity. And actually, it's hard yakka. It's very unglamorous in many regards. And there are very few companies like that. And a lot of startups, the other point, they're not 23 and 26-year-olds. I'm in the zone of 50, and it's a different age to be doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right there. Like, there is this glamorous kind of, portrayal that we get, that people are starting at such a young age and kicking these amazing goals. And it's a little bit fabricated,
Mm-hmm.
For your average human, it's not uncommon to be the 30, 40, 50-year-old, that's made that change in their life. Like I actually interviewed someone quite a few episodes ago, and he'd changed his career at, I'm going to guess his age now. I think he was about, like 55 or something like that, completely flipped his career and started another business in a completely different area at such a late age. But, he was just so happy. He was really happy to have made that change. So, I don't think there's ever a wrong time,
No, but I think you just have to be fair to yourself a little bit,
Absolutely. Agree. And how has your business responded to the market, given, the changes that came through in 2020 and COVID? What have you seen during 2020 in your business?
We have seen huge growth, tremendous growth. It's actually been really great for us from a business point of view. A few different sort of variables come into play from a consumer demand point of view. People were looking at doing things at home and pampering themselves and self-care.
Yep.
So we have a lot of natural bath salts blended with essential oils and things like that, which people were buying. People had time to research what was good and what wasn't good, and we want to be a trusted brand in the natural and reliable salt area. So and so we got a lot of activity that way, and also the same thing as people were experimenting at home with cooking as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw a lot of growth. We also, this is our, almost our first year now in Amazon. Oh. So we sell through Amazon and eBay and Catch, and it's all sort of integrated, and as well as our own website. And that really grew tremendously as well.
Mm.
So, there's been some, people often ask me, is Amazon a good channel for Australian retailers? And the answer is, if you can be a critical player early on in the growth of Amazon, you can do quite well out of it.
Yeah.
And we were in a niche that wasn't that well exploited, and we grew very well with them. Mm. And they gave us a lot of help too. They're trying to grow certain key vendors, and they were very helpful.
Yeah, I was just about to ask what that was like starting with Amazon. Like a lot of people probably, have their own website. A lot of people are on Shopify's and mm-hmm. that type of thing for products these days, and, across your social media channels as well. Like Facebook's got stores, Instagram's got stores. There's so many options available. But I think you're actually the first person I've spoken to that's on Amazon. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience, actually. We've just been over a year maybe at this point, and we went from zero to well over $100,000 in sales in 1 year with them, and that's just continuing to grow.
Wow.
And they're definitely looking at how they grow in Australia, but they're becoming a much more important part of the fabric. And I think that the COVID challenges we've all had really fueled that for them.
Yeah.
And so that's just really escalated it. We have an account manager we work with, and he's great in putting us forward and helping us a bit. And we've done a lot of test and learn. I mean, I think we have multiple channels, right? We have eBay and Amazon and our own website, which we promote through the Google channels. And each one of those is a test and learn, and each one of them requires a lot of focus.
Yeah.
And each one of them, they have nuances. They have some similarities, but they also have nuances, and you do need to learn what they are. So it's quite a lot of learning. And I would say that particularly about Amazon as well, and that's why there are all those sort of Amazon coaches out there.
Yeah.
If everyone's different, but if you're willing to get down and learn and take some time and watch a lot of YouTube clips and things like that, you can get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And yeah. I just thought then when you said about all these different platforms that you're on, like your inventory stock levels must be, I'd like to say a nightmare, but I'm actually going to guess that you're on top of it, and it's not the nightmare that it could be.
No, it was a nightmare this year, actually, because we just couldn't have anticipated the growth. We knew we had growth already, but it was greater than expected.
Yeah.
And we import the finest salts from different locations around the world, and there are a lot of different salts. Most people think it's just sodium with chloride, like the food salt, but we have magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salt, magnesium chloride, which is magnesium flakes, and we have black salts, and we have red salts, and we have all sorts of things, and they all come from around the world. So some of them are long lead times, and containers were really challenged this year. So we have had some challenges in bringing it in and converting it into retail sales packaging and getting it back out to consumers. So that's required a lot of work. Wouldn't say we're under control. We're doing okay. I had to, as we grew, I had to bring on a supply chain consultant to help me do it. So
yeah,
you get to a point where you realize it's beyond your capacity.
Oh, absolutely. When you're talking, moving volumes of products, like you say, from your warehouse to the consumer, and it's going in all different directions across multiple channels. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. That was a big one. So I guess what have you learned, and what's your takeaway from that growth from COVID? What did you learn during that time specifically? Like you experienced growth, you had these challenges. What was the outcome? What can you share with us?
Yeah, I kind of went through a two-step process, and this actually happened before COVID. I realized that digital marketing, and in particular, I'm referring to SEO, search engine optimization, and search engine marketing, so paid search with Google, as well as Amazon and Amazon paid, because there's some similarities and differences between all those, but they all need to be managed. I realized that I was not an expert, or I wasn't even close to being an expert, and I would outsource that to agencies. And that in of itself is a very normal, natural thing to do.
Yep.
The problem I had is when you're running a small business, you have to really make sure you're getting your return on investment.
Yep.
And the only way I could figure out how to continue to drive growth and really get the best return on investment, and knowing and accepting that those channels and those fees going to marketing were part of growth, was to actually dive in and learn those channels, those marketing channels myself.
Yeah.
I couldn't, I was relying too heavily on agencies, and to be fair, the agencies, I was probably not providing the best direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned for sure that the best thing to do would be to just sit in front of my computer and learn a lot more about Google SEO, and a lot more about search engine marketing, the Google advertising, and again, similarly with Amazon listings and Amazon advertising. And once I had embraced that, I could then go back, which I did later in the year. I went back and engaged agencies, but with the right frame of reference, with the right scope in my mind and the right expectations, and it was a much better outcome. So that's what I would learn. I think you can't just outsource it. You have to understand it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually, because if we, it's great that we don't need to wear necessarily all the hats ourselves, but when you go to outsource, if you have no knowledge in that space, you're flying blind. You don't, like even to say to an agency, what do you want? If you don't know the base of what you want, then you're just going to pay for whatever you get, and you kind of just land wherever you land, really.
Correct.
Yeah.
I guess that's, part of my corporate background. I thought, I better get a specialist to handle this specialist area, but I really needed to understand it too.
Yeah.
And that was my learning. So once that happened, we really started taking off.
Yeah.
And I'm much more aligned to the agencies that I use now.
Yeah. So going back to before, when you first outsourced this to an agency and you didn't have that understanding, your return on investment, you truly feel is better now that you do have the understanding, but is that a result of working with the right agency? It's a combination, isn't it?
It's always a combination. It's definitely, look, I think it's partly working with the right agency. I had an agency that when I talked to them about return on investment for Google ad spend, said to me, we're not responsible for sales. Well, unfortunately, to get a return on investment, you have to have a view to sales, and if you're not going to take that view, then you're not the right agency. So we then had to go back and find an agency that would take that analytical side and return on investment side a lot more at hand than the prior one.
Yeah. But you've done clearly hours of research yourself. Hours.
I had also, and research comes in lots of forms. So it's not just watching a couple of YouTube clips, because there's some I would sometimes errors, but not necessarily errors, but some half stories you can get on YouTube. You don't get the whole story.
Yeah.
Necessarily, unless you're really sure of the source. But I also I hired a coach to help me with Google advertising, and did the advertising myself. And I hired a coach to help me with Amazon as well, to start that process. And I would say that I had some success in doing that myself, better than before. And I certainly realized a better return on investment because I wasn't paying agency fees. But I also realized the degree at which I was not able to dive in even deeper.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's why I needed to bring on an agency who would do that and take it to the next level.
Yeah, full on. Oh my God.
It was very full on. I learned a lot about SEO. And actually, anyone who really wants to drive their website, learning about SEO is really critical. It's SEO, people sometimes think it's maybe this technical thing that you outsource to technical people, and some of it is technical, but the very basis of it is not. And And understanding that is critical. And I got myself a subscription to SEMrush.
Yep.
SEMrush. And I gather a lot of the agencies that use Ahrefs, either one. And that was really telling as to giving me insights as to what keywords were really important to me and how to place those keywords and what backlinks might be important. And that was huge lessons. And the moment I started doing that, and that stuff I did on my own, I had a massive increase in my Google rankings.
Wow.
I compared a couple of my key pages with key pages of my competitors, for example, in those tools where it gave me a lot of insight. So I think massive learning. I think I didn't know what I didn't know to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's intense.
It was very intense, yeah. And believe me, I was happy to appoint agencies once I could.
Yeah, but it sounds like a really good journey to undertake because, like we said before, like, you know, you've started at a point, but then you've done this element of learning, you know, and really anyone could take that as far as they want to go. You know, like you said, you can dive deeper. I'm sure you know, it's probably endless where you could go with these little areas of learning for our business. But then it's helped you get to the point where you can assign it to the right people, work closely with them to get the result that you're paying for their services, but probably getting even better results than before.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's my big takeaway. And it certainly was heightened by COVID for sure, because all the demand was at a higher level. But we really saw massive benefits from those things. So yeah, it's been really a good journey. I'm not sure I planned it that way. Not everything that you do is planned, but that's, in hindsight, it's been a good exercise.
So I have to ask the question, what's next on your learning list?
Like all good small business people, you sort of try and master one area and then you have to move on to the next. And we're getting to a point where we outsource a lot of our sort of production and our logistics. And just wondering what's the right model going forward now that we've got to a certain scale.
Yeah.
So scaling in and of itself, I'm really understanding. Everyone's always said it's a challenge to scale your business, but I'm really understanding from the inside, what does that mean? Is, you know, when do you hire a marketing person, or when do you hire an inventory manager, or which one's the higher priority? Because that's what it comes down to. With limited resources, you have to choose your priorities. And that sounds simple, but it's not always simple. And you have to ask yourself where your strengths are, where your biases are, you know, all sorts of things to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, sometimes we've got to be a little bit honest with ourselves.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
That is a lesson in small business as well. I think, you know, it's very up and down, and you do need to be honest with yourself. And I think it does take resilience, and it takes resilience because as you go through the learning on all the things you don't know, and there are always a lot of them, I'm sure, you make mistakes, and I think I make mistakes at a much faster rate than I did in the corporate world. And so you have to be able to pick yourself up and not be too hard on yourself about that. And that was a major adjustment for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I always think we have to look back to look forward, and you've got to grab those pieces and you've got to learn from them. But you're right, you just can't beat yourself up at the same time because everyone's doing it. We're no different to the next business owner. We're all learning as we go. And yeah, I think it's just so good that there's so many of us that are doing that these days. I agree with you. YouTube has just got this massive wealth of knowledge.
A huge amount. Yeah.
Got to pick and choose, absolutely. And I think you're right as well. Something you said before was, you know, finding a resource that you can trust is probably critical key number one there, particularly when it comes to YouTube, because, and I went down this road during 2020 of marketing, watching YouTube videos about, you know, Instagram and things like that. And then one says this and one says that. And you're like, oh, hang on a minute. Which way am I? And you'll run around like a headless chook if you're not careful, you know? But, yeah.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, you know, in particular with Amazon, the rules changed. So, and to some degree, Google. So what was relevant a year ago might not be relevant. And you always have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, change is just rife in marketing, very, very broad, isn't it? Yes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we've covered some really good points. Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing some background knowledge on your business and where you've been and where you've come to, and yeah, it's a fantastic story. So, Rowena, where can we find you?
We're online at www.thesaltbox.com.au.
Awesome.
And we are big into customer service, so if you ever have a question, just let us know.
And on all the social channels, Facebook,
Instagram, they're the primary ones, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Rowena. It was lovely to chat. Thanks for coming on the show.
No worries. Thanks for your time, Kerry.
Thanks for joining us on the BizNation podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating or review. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Zinc Business Solutions, and you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on our website at zincbusinesssolutions.com.au.